Greetings, compadres. Guess what? I have a guest today. And even better than actually just randomly, like, oh, I have a guest. I have a guest who's an ADHD coach. And as you know, if you listen to Eternally Amy, I have ADHD and was diagnosed as an adult. So I am so excited to get to talk to Sheila Henson today. Now, here's the thing. She's an ADHD coach and an educator, and her personal experience with ADHD helps her better understand and support clients who face similar challenges. So she offers coaching. Is it meditation or mediation?
Mediation.
Okay, good. Can't wait to ask you about that. Okay, mediation and training services supporting self-acceptance and positive behavior change, which is key. So I am thrilled to have you on today, Sheila. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yay. Okay, so I would love to give you an opportunity just to unpack as little or as much as you would like to about what led you to where you are today and doing the work that you're doing.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's a very long story, but it starts with being born to two ADHD parents, and then being raised with three ADHD siblings, probably, or at least three neurodivergent siblings for sure. And then having a ton of cousins, being the oldest of like 14 cousins, and most of which have ADHD, and tutoring them and doing all that. But so I was literally born into this job. But I started doing work professionally right out of high school, working in home with kids with behavioral issues. And that was really fun. So that was a lot of ADHD kids, as well as like autistic kids and other different neurodivergences going on there. And I loved that work, and I did it for about 12 years in various capacities with crisis prevention, intervention, things like that. And then became a teacher, did special education teaching for kids with neurodivergence and trauma, which the two together is this special combination, you know? And then when the pandemic hit, I was teaching online. And for my ADHD brain, that was not working. That was really not working. I need to be with people. I need to be talking to people live. And the kids, most of those kids were in group homes and things, so they weren't showing up to the live sessions, you know? So I was talking to myself all day, and I just wasn't doing a good job anymore. You know, that's not how we roll. So I started coaching, and it's been a blast. It's like, but a big part of this is that I'm ADHD. I didn't get diagnosed until my late 20s. I was diagnosed in my early 20s with OCD, anxiety, depression, which is the story for a lot of especially women with ADHD, is being diagnosed with depression, anxiety first, and then either OCD, bipolar, borderline, something like that, before actually getting diagnosed with ADHD. And even though my sister had it, my mom's been diagnosed, things like that, but still they didn't catch me because I was just more on the inattentive side. I like to read and sit in my room quietly for a long time, but that was mostly anxiety. And once actually I came out of my shell, turns out I'm hyperactive as heck. I was just really actually was pretty anxious. And since getting diagnosed, I don't have really anxiety or depression anymore now that I treated my ADHD. Not on any medications for those things. They don't, definitely not depressed. Pretty psyched about life, actually. Even though, with ADHD, we do have more sensitive nervous systems, so the anxiety can definitely hit at times, but I wouldn't call it like a chronic situation. That wasn't really what was going on. It was the ADHD underneath all of that. And it was really hard to find information about that stuff. And I'm a person who hyper focused on it, and I love helping other people. I always have. Like I said, I've been doing this work in this general realm for over 20 years now. And so with all of the different types of work I've done in the field of neurodiversity, I guess you could say, then I've gotten to learn a whole bunch of different avenues for support. So there's like the crisis prevention avenues. I even did learn behaviorism stuff, which I don't support. But it was still there are some tools in there that have been helpful moving forward. And I'm learning somatics. I'm doing like a somatic therapy training. The body mind connection is, I think, something that gets neglected there. And then the actual like new coming neuroscience that's coming out, the science on the genetics of ADHD and the science on the the biological aspects, how our brains are actually different, how our nervous systems are different. All of this stuff isn't really getting to doctors and therapists as fast as I would love it to. And so I knew I couldn't rely on the professionals that I was going to give me this information. So I had to start going to the source. And in collecting all of this information and from all of these different sort of methodologies and things like that, I was like, oh, if I put this all together, this has helped me. Now I can kind of share all of these different avenues with other people. And so that's what kind of led me to being a coach, and just realized that the things that I was doing for my friends and family, I could get paid for, and that that was really fun. So yeah, I teach classes. I do couples coaching, which includes like mediation, and I'm certified equity informed mediator. And like I said, I love looking at all the different parts of this, because ADHD affects every single part of our lives. It affects our physicality, it affects our relationships, it affects our learning, it affects our ability to, succeed in our jobs and at home, like everything. So I want to learn about all of those little things and be able to put them together to give people sort of to help them to navigate, like, okay, this is the path that you need to take in order to get to where you want to be.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for all that. I mean, we are kindred spirits on a personal level with the ADHD, but you have fully researched, it sounds like, all of these different aspects of it. So like of the ADHD tree trunk, you've, taken the time to look at all these different branches, which is huge. It's huge. And I think that that is commendable. So thank you for doing that. And, I know for myself, like when I was first diagnosed with ADHD, I mean, it was kind of like, yeah, what took me so long to put these pieces together? Because, I could look back even as a kid throughout my lifetime looking at like, oh, so I've always been, one of my sensitive trigger spots has been people thinking I'm dumb or stupid or not a quick learner, because I grew up in the Silicon Valley and everybody's parents were tech this, tech that, tech boom. This is prior to the tech boom, but just everybody was very educationally focused, and I always felt behind and just dumb and more of the creative side. And so because that's a sensitivity for me, right? I would always try and overcompensate for that, and that would create anxiety. I'd be afraid that I'd miss appointments, as I grew into adulthood, or miss a deadline. And so I'd have anxiety over that. And then I would screw something up. And so that would kind of spiral into depression. And the way my psychiatrist explained it to me was like, yeah, you're caught in a cycle because you're treating the wrong things. You have ADHD, which he tried to tell me for a long time. He said, I wish you would take these tests because I think it would empower you. And I was like, I'm fine. I don't need that. And he was obviously right. But, when I found out that, oh, yeah, sure enough, I'm treating the wrong thing, similar to what you were saying. It was like those other things that I thought I had that, I threw out all my Zoloft and all that because I was able to, because I was like, oh, I'm not depressed anymore. I'm finally treating the wrong thing, which then, of course, I will tell you was kind of eye-opening, because I'm like, no, I felt dumb for not getting the right thing treated and for not
Oh
listening to my
no.
doctor. So it turned into, of course, I made it into a thing. But I love that you have taken the time to do all this research. And so it sounds fascinating and empowering, especially helping other people in the field. And I'm just wondering, what does a coach do? And how does it differ from a psychiatrist? Because I'm kind of interested. I'm like, this sounds like something I might need to do, like get into and be
Yeah.
coached.
Yeah, it's super fun. And I mean, and it's really good for my ADHD brain because depending on my client, I do get to go down all these tree branches, as you said, and for ADHD, having that novelty is super important, right? Having new things to learn, new things to explore. So for me, the job of being a coach, it never gets boring. And that's why, I love it. There's so many different things I can do with it. And so coaching, yeah, can go down a lot of different branches, but it's very different from a psychiatrist or a therapist. And I think it works best in tandem. So I always recommend my clients have, a psychiatrist if they want medication, and a therapist if they have access to that. Of course, access is a big issue, right?
Yeah.
But I like a psychiatrist is going to deal with the medication and more the physicality of your ADHD, right? Which for a lot of people is life-saving, and for some people they just can't get one that works, and that's fine. I do hear people sometimes saying like, well, I tried Adderall and I got anxious, so I guess I don't have ADHD. Like, no, that's not how it works. Like, our bodies are so complex. They're so different. Some people with ADHD drink coffee and they get tired. Some people with ADHD drink coffee and have a panic attack. We tend to be weird and sensitive, but that there's no necessarily like a correlation, just an FYI. But then a therapist is really going to go into the deep, therapy, I think people who don't really understand therapy think it's just talking.
Right.
Like, I'm just going to talk to my therapist and they're going to give me great advice. And it's like, that's not what therapy is. And I think a lot of the time the therapists don't cue you into like what modality they're using or what methodology they're using. They're doing some sort of secret trickery, which actually with ADHD, we sometimes don't like that. We like want to know what's happening so we can see track the progress. Otherwise, it kind of seems like we're just spinning. So I hear a lot of ADHDers saying like, oh, I tried therapy, it didn't do anything. I would just get in there, I would talk, and we can talk. And then I'd leave and I'd be like, wait, I just spent $150 to talk at somebody. I can do that at home for free. What is this? So finding the right kind of therapy for you, either a therapist who knows, who is collaborative with you about like, this is when I'm going to cut you off. This is what we're doing right now, things like that. Or I really recommend the more body focused therapies, EMDR, somatics, TRE, brain spotting, things like that for ADHD. Because a lot of the time we've already intellectualized everything, all of our feelings, all of our experiences, but we haven't given ourselves time to feel them, because being present and in the moment and in our bodies is just not our strong suit, right? So having someone to help us do that can be incredibly powerful and can actually improve executive functioning over time, which is, life-saving. Like, so myself, so a therapist is going to be healing the nervous system, processing trauma, dealing with deep feelings like shame and abandonment and, all of those things, right? I'm going to say, in the meantime, here's what we're going to do, right? Because therapy takes a long time. It takes a long time to heal a nervous system. It takes a long time to go in and figure out the traumas that you've had and go through them and reprocess them and do all of that. But in the meantime, I have to get my dishes done. So like, what am I going to do? Right? So so I would make a plan with you, like, okay, knowing you have ADHD, we're motivated by certain things: novelty, interest and passion, rush, urgency, and challenge. And that challenge is kind of complicated because it can't be too hard or F that, and it can't be too easy because then we're bored, right? But a good amount of challenge that we know we can get that reward. I want to solve a puzzle. I want to do this thing real quick, we love that. So we're not going to be motivated as much by reward and punishment. We're going to be rewarded by these things. So let's say I'm having trouble doing, you'd come to me as a client and say, I'm having trouble getting the dishes done, even though my husband yells at me every time the dishes aren't done. So I'm getting this punishment and I know I'm going to feel so good when they're done. So I know there's a reward, but I still can't get myself to do it. Like, okay, yeah, that's executive dysfunction. We can dive into what's going on there. Is there a perfectionism? Are you exhausted? is it understimulating? Is it boring? Is there a sensory aspect? It smells bad, it feels bad, that's why you're avoiding it. What's going on there? And then we come up with a plan oh, okay, well, it's a sensory issue. So we're going to get some gloves and light some incense. And it's understimulating. So we're going to put on a podcast or some music while you do it. And ideally, you can have a body double. So maybe while your husband is sweeping, you're doing the dishes, you're both doing that at the same time. It's going to be more likely to happen. And maybe you're going to have a schedule where you're doing this at the same time every day so that your brain can prepare for it and you're not sort of stuck in decision paralysis of like, should I do the dishes now? No, I'll just put it off till later. Da, da, da. Like, no, let's make an actual like time for that. Now, there's a whole bunch of different tools and different ones are going to work better for different people. So you work with a coach to figure out what those tools are, fill up your toolbox, and then you can, when you hit those walls, find a way around it. So that's like one example of what I do.
Okay, I love that. I love that for so many reasons, but primarily because it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a very specified process. Like, sure, you can look at all the pieces, but you can sort of put them together into action steps. And I think
Yes.
sometimes, at least with I mean, you couldn't have worded my experience with therapy any clearer than you did, which was the first time I went to therapy. I was in college, and I remember sitting there with this woman, and she kept asking me questions, and I kept giving her, you know, stuff to work with. And in my mind, I thought she was going to say, well, here's what you do about this. Of course, she didn't say that. I don't even know what kind of methodology she used, but it was kind of this like, it was kind of an underwhelming experience. And I didn't write off therapy. I've had many therapists over the years. I firmly believe in it, that it's wonderful. It has its place and all of this. But it was like a weird experience because I left and I thought, I could have just talked to a stranger on a bus for way cheaper, you know? And it was like, I really just needed like, well, what can I do about this? Because I wasn't in a position to kind of talk myself through it and do some kind of cognitive behavioral therapy or something because I didn't know what I didn't know what to pull out. I didn't have any of that in me yet. I didn't have any tools. I didn't have a diagnosis. And
Right.
so the whole thing was just kind of weird and hard and awkward, and therapy's not easy. I get that. But it felt I felt more lost when I quit going to the sessions than I did when I originally came.
Yeah. And that's the thing too with some like life coaches that are not ADHD coaches. And it's possible some ADHD coaches that came from that do this too, where they just want to ask you a lot of questions and like you figure it out. But you're like, no,
Mhm.
no, if I don't know what's happening, I can't figure it out. That's been the problem my whole life. Like
Right.
that's exactly like no one's explained how my brain works. No one's explained what I need, what my needs are. I've just been told to ignore them because they don't make sense to other people, And so
Right.
like I actually need someone to give me those tools. And so I teach classes where I just kind of, here's a general toolbox for people. The one-on-one coaching is going to be more like back and forth problem solving.
Mhm.
And the couples coaching is that for couples where I can actually translate. So let's
Mm.
say your husband says like, well, she never does the dishes. She clearly doesn't care about me. She doesn't care about the house. She,
Mm.
like she doesn't care about our marriage, like blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, actually, like, let's ask her. And she's like, no, I do care. I just can't freaking do the dishes. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, how else can she show that she cares? Can she take a second job and then we hire a maid? Like we can problem solve something here where everybody feels like they're getting their needs met. And that doesn't mean, oh, she has ADHD, she can't do it. Sorry, husband, you're gonna have to do all the cleaning while she eats bonbons. Like, no, 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 no. We're gonna figure out maybe she doesn't mind cleaning the toilet. So she has the toilet and you do the dishes, and that's the way that your house works, or
Yeah.
whatever. Like we work out some, but if you don't know what's happening, then if you're just asking questions like, well, why aren't you doing the dishes? Just ask
Mhm.
yourself that. And you're like, I legitimately don't know. I couldn't figure out it in first grade why I wasn't doing my homework. And I couldn't figure out in fourth grade why I wasn't cleaning my room. And I couldn't figure out in, high school why I was always late to hang out with my friends or do things I wanted to do or, and as an adult, late for doctor's appointments. I couldn't figure out all that. Why am I going to figure this out right now? Can you
Mhm.
just give me some information, right? So that's one of the things I do is I just educate people on how their brains work. And they can problem solve for themselves. And if they need help with that process, I can help with that process too.
That's so beautiful because, the other part of it is too, it's like, a moral failure, a character failure, depending on our background and how we grew up and some of the institutions we may have been involved in or religions and etc. It's like, well, there's something wrong with you. And then once you kind of internalize that guilt and shame, and for my generation, at least Generation X, we were not, I mean, this wasn't a thing for girls, hyperactive boys had ADHD back in the day. They didn't do studies on girls back then, when we were kids in my generation. And so it was always like, oh, well, what's wrong with you? And then once, for me, I'll speak for myself, once I internalized that piece, it was terrible, right? Because then I was always in this like spiral of shame and guilt and feeling like, something's wrong with me. So the whole concept of neurodivergence was like, when I first started learning even little tiny bits about it, it was amazing. It was as if somebody turned the TV from a black and white screen to a color screen. And it was like, no, you just learn differently. Like your brain is different. It's okay. And it took like all the pressure off of me because then it was like, oh, well, I can work with that. Now I know what the root of all of this is. And that I love that. And I think it's fascinating. And I loved, you were talking about, you mentioned EMDR. Did I say that right? Okay. And I don't know a lot about that field, but what I do know a little bit, tiny bit about, and also the somatic fields, right, is that those are more tangible type. Can you expand on even just what those are? Because I got to tell you, that stuff to me is huge as a neurodivergent learner. Psh, huge.
I think that for specifically ADHD, autism, and like CPTSD, the what we used to call highly sensitive person, right? Which are like, oh, I don't know if it's like the person that, like the woman who created highly sensitive person, she was creating that criteria, looking at the women in her family who later got diagnosed autistic. So like we like, but we have sensitive nervous systems, and that's well documented in the research now with ADHD and autism. And so we are more likely to experience trauma, because trauma is not what happens to you, it's your body's reaction to what happens to you. So because our bodies have more sensitive reaction, we can become traumatized to things that maybe other people would be able to just brush off, right? So things like EMDR and somatics help us to get into the nervous system. And I'm not an expert on either of these things. Like I said, I'm doing a somatic therapist training, not done yet. But in my experience working with a somatic therapist myself, and I talk to hundreds of people a day on social media, in my classes, one-on-one. And the number one thing that people say that ADHDers and autistics say was a game changer for their executive dysfunction and their shame was EMDR. That is by far. And it's because you're going back to these into your nervous system, to the way that I understand it, like where we've got damage, let's say, if you want to use that terminology, but we have dysregulation, and we're reprogramming that to feel safe. So in times when we felt unsafe, we can sort of reprogram those memories and those times to feel safe. And I know there are a lot of people that say, oh, I can't remember my trauma, or I can't remember my childhood, or I don't know how that's going to work. And it does seem to work for those people as well. But I mean, what works for one person is not always going to be the same for another person. But by and large, EMDR is the number one thing that I hear, this changed my life. And somatics also seems to be really high on that list. So those are the two things that I recommend the most. And it's exactly what you're saying, the shame, the just insane amounts of shame that we have from childhood all the way through. And then you add into that, with ADHD, we're more likely to have rejection sensitive dysphoria, where we have like not only a sensitivity to actual rejection, but perceived rejection. We're making up rejection, I remember crying when I was a kid if my friend was like, oh, I don't think I want to sleep over tonight. And I'd be like, she hates me.
Like, the end of the world.
It's the end of the world. And so all of that, so the way that like our brain and nervous system, as we experience little bits of, you know, adverse experiences, we won't even call it trauma, like big T trauma, you know, but like adverse experiences. So you're dysregulated, you're stressed. Oh, I don't know, what was the assignment? What page are we on?
Mm.
Oh my God, if I don't get my homework done, I can't go to my friend's house. Oh no, like, was that thing due today? You know, like oh no, I overdrafted again. Am I forgetting something? I'm always forgetting something. I'm always forgetting something, right? So we're chronically that chronic dysregulation
Uh-huh.
actually changes the physicality of our brains and our bodies. And so
Mm.
it, you know, it's really interesting. We also tend to have more hyperactive or overactive amygdalas, which is like the part of the brain that's just like fight or flight, you know, like thing, right? So other people might see it as overreacting. We're sensitive. We're the canaries in the coal mine. We're
Yeah.
going to react stronger, not only to you know, behavioral things, but even like environmental things. Like our bodies tend to be more sensitive to medications, to toxins, to all kinds of things. There's some research on that that's really interesting. And you know, we're more likely to have gut issues, migraines, also more likely to be hypermobile and have like joint issues, connective tissue issues, more likely to have overactive histamine, like mast cell activation syndrome, or other types of histamine things. Like we have just like, we're just sensitive people in these like certain ways, and then can also be insensitive because we're in our own little worlds.
Mm. You know what, though? That is freaking fascinating. Seriously. And it's so incredible to me that now that information is available, because it's just like, oh, okay, that's helpful. And I'm wondering if you can tell me more about the genetic component to that, because I mean, I have a dad that, I mean, he has it. Okay, I'm just going to say I'm not a professional, but
Right.
I just know. And then I've got some kids too who have been tested. So I'm just interested in that whole idea.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a
Mhm.
geneticist, but from what I understand, it's just highly genetic. And it's the one interesting thing is that it seems to be really tied in with autism. Families that have ADHD tend to also have autism in them, families with autism, which ends up really fun for me coaching, because I get a lot of ADHD parents with autistic kids and autistic parents with ADHD kids. And if you're an ADHD parent who's like, I'm going to be free and wild and my kid can do whatever they want, and you have an autistic kid who's like, oh my God, if I don't have structure, I'm going to freak out, then
Yeah.
how do we, you know, how do you manage that, and vice versa? So like the autistic parent that's like, oh, we have a schedule and we have everything, da, 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 and the kid's like, well, you know, like this ADHD kid. And those families are really fun to coach, and doing that like cross neurotype communication anyway. But genetically, we've found some studies that showed that some specific genes that are related to ADHD, and some specific genes that are related to autism, and some specific genes that are related to both, which I thought was really interesting in showing
Oh,
how they would go in families together. Also, if you have ADHD, you're more likely to be autistic. If you're autistic, you're more likely to have ADHD. So that stuff's really interesting to me because I work with a lot of ADHD autistic clients. And I have a sister who's ADHD, and my best friend's ADHD. Anyway, so,
wow.
but the genetics they're strong. I mean, they seem to be, even now doctors are even saying, you know, when a kid gets diagnosed, they're like, which one of you is it? And if it's not you, which grandparent is it? You know, like it's
Mhm.
somebody. It's definitely didn't come from nowhere. And like, I mean, one of the interesting things with the ADHD is that we're talking about ADHD as the neurotype, and that's usually how I'm talking about it. Same with autism. Like I'm talking about the genetic basis that comes with all of these comorbidities, that comes with this type of brain that has these needs, and da da da. But a lot of people talk about ADHD as the diagnostic criteria, which is basically just
Mm.
a list of problems.
Yes.
And you can get that list of problems from other things like trauma. You know, CPTSD can cause a lot of that list. Even
Okay.
autism, like a lot of the time they get misdiagnosed for each other because the executive dysfunction can be really similar, even though there's some parts of it that are complete opposites. um, and so there's other things. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is another one that's like so prominent, no one wants to talk about it because there's a stigma, you know, like,
Mm.
it's sorry you had some wine while you were pregnant and now your kid has ADHD symptoms, and they're like, no, it couldn't be that, whatever, you know, my doctor said it was fine, like,
Right?
yeah, sorry, it's not. And so like that's another one. So if we're talking about ADHD as the set of symptoms, then there's a bunch of different causes. But if we're talking about ADHD, the neurotype, which we can see is genetic, has a genetic basis, and has all these other things that go with it, then anyway, that is genetic, and that's really interesting. That's more interesting to me, the neurotypes, than the
Sure.
list of, because I see people that come to me, they're like, oh, I want executive functioning help because of long COVID. I'm like, great, come on in.
Yeah.
I want executive functioning help, but I don't really feel like I fit in with ADHD, but I do have this issue. And I'm like, great, come on in. Who cares? I'm
Yeah.
not a doctor. I don't care about your diagnosis. But I do, just for myself and like research purposes and just interest purposes, I'm really fascinated by neurodiversity, all the different types of brains, all the different ways that we see the world, how that affects our bodies, how that affects our nervous systems, like, and the genetics. But this is the wild west of that. Like, we got the tip of the iceberg. I'm waiting for more research. I'm like hungry for it, like there's so much more for us to learn about it.
That's so funny that you said tip of the iceberg, because I was thinking that for myself when you were talking. I was like, there is so much I don't know, and it's fascinating to hear you even talk about the differentiation between the genetic components and the what was the word that you used
The
besides
diagnostic
the
criteria.
diagnostic criteria? Because yeah, I mean, and I love that you said, it sort of doesn't matter, like your diagnosis is your diagnosis, but yeah, let's come in and talk about how you're seeing this manifest in your daily life. What challenges are you having? Because really, that's when the rubber meets the road, right? Is like, oh, once again, I've let my car run out of gas and I don't have enough time to stop this morning, and I'm like way low. And, it's those kinds of things that are just, that's what we deal with day to day, is that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So,
And even another one of those is, people don't talk about menopause and
yeah.
how menopause can, if you have ADHD, it's really highly related to estrogen, which we're getting more studies on. So because estrogen is needed to make neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, or epinephrine, right? So even if you're taking an ADHD medication, if there's no estrogen, the medication can't work. So a lot of people will say, oh, right before my cycle, my meds don't work. It's because that's when your estrogen's usually lower. And then when you hit menopause, it's really low, right? And so for those who don't do hormone replacement therapy, it can be really bad. But even I talked to women who weren't diagnosed ADHD, didn't really have any problems with ADHD until menopause, but now they need those tips, tricks, and strategies and things like that because of what that's doing. And that's also just really fascinating to me. I don't know, it's like a side note.
No, I think that's fantastic. And, this is something that I have been thinking about a lot, because I'm like, gosh, I'm 47. And in the next 10 years or so, I mean, I'll be in that category. And now, even now with perimenopause, like, this is just such a huge, topic. And then, it does start to affect your self-esteem, the whole brain fog and not being able to select the words that you want to say, but you know what they are, and that whole connection of how to get past that. And there's another like wave of shame that comes along with that. Like, well, what's wrong with me? So this is an important topic too. So I love all of this so much. Um, and I'm glad we live in an era where all of this, we're starting to learn more and have it be accepted. I mean, that's the huge thing. Yeah.
Right. There's like a revolution in neurodiversity. And it's interesting because it comes at a time where in some ways things are much harder for us than they've ever been. Having to keep track of emails and phone calls and text messages and having these screens like at our disposal in our faces 24/7. Like, this stuff really is rough on it's rough on all brains. It's creating ADHD symptoms in non-ADHDers, and but for ADHDers, it's really hard. Like, we have impulse control issues. You're like, okay, I'm supposed to stop scrolling social media that's giving me like all this stimulation and making me feel good, and like I'm supposed to use all of my impulse control and my executive function to like like make a plan to be like, I'm going to use this only in moderation. Like, but like that is rough. And like you need to keep track of like this, and that, right? Like our food isn't nutritious, which is super important because ADHDers tend to have, we tend to be low in certain nutrients, including like B12 and D3 and zinc and magnesium and stuff like that. So like there's so many societal things, our expectations, our daily routines, what we're exposed to, that's making things harder for us, which then people are like, wow, there's so much more ADHDers. It's like, no, we've always been ADHD. It just hasn't been this hard. Like, you know, when we were
Yes.
outside doing things, right? And then and you know, we could just like when you walk out of your house, there's no one can get a hold of you, and that's normal. And like you don't have to keep track of every second of everything. But like in other ways, like you said, now we are finally understanding this. I mean, no one even did research on ADHD and estrogen until the last like till it was like 1990s. It was
Oh
like,
my word.
and
Wow.
it's still just like just now they're talking about researching menopause. So little information on pregnancy and menopause with ADHD, and anyway, it's very frustrating. So it's amazing that we're having all of this new information, and you know, and in some ways it's harder. So yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting time for sure.
So incredibly thought-provoking too. I love this conversation. And you know, it's funny when you mention like all of the emails and all the stuff pouring in, like, you know, my favorite people, and I'm being sarcastic when I say this, are the ones that are like, oh, like, didn't you get that, you know, school newsletter that was sent like, you know, 50 times? And I'm like, you know what? I'm doing my best. Like, I got 8 kids. I mean, some are adults, but I'm still kind of involved in their lives. I mean, to a certain extent. And, you know, I'm just doing my, no, I did not read the fine print at the way bottom of the newsletter. Like, I don't know what to tell you, you know?
Yeah.
And learning to live life as a loose garment and not get stuck on those things that I miss, and instead reframe and look at all, okay, but what are all the things that you did nail today, so to speak, you
Yes.
know, and to focus on those positives. And yeah, I mean, I remember a time if you left the house, and this is like prior to answering machines or voicemail, like somebody would just call, you wouldn't pick up because you weren't there, and they'd have to call back and try you again another time. What freedom. Like now that I think about it, you know, a hassle, but also like how nice at the same time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think that's so interesting because, and I'm wondering, I'm going to throw something at you. Just, I know it's not this easy. This is not a one size fits all answer by any means, and it's not simple. But one of the biggest complaints that I have about my own executive functioning or lack of, and or challenges with, and also my ADHD friends, is all of the different buckets that we deal with in life, right? The cognitive load, especially as mothers or as women, that we carry, you know, all those little details, like what's going on with the house, what's going on with each individual child, and you know, their sports, their academics, their each little thing involved in each kid. What's going on with my relationship with my spouse or partner, and what different things need to be attended to, and what are my needs, and have I communicated those, and what's, there's all that. And then there's just like, you know, groceries, and there's did I do this, and deadlines, and work, and all of the different plates that we spin. I have never found, and I've like worked with a lot of, you know, doctors who have tried to give me some like ideas. And of course, you know, you watch whatever, trying to help you try different things. But like, I've never found a great system for me that works in terms of like, if I have like 15, 20 minutes, I don't know what to do because I can't, and I have a list. I have a running list of things to do if I have 15 or 20 minutes, and it's like I freeze and I can't make myself do it because I suddenly am like, it's like I'm short circuiting or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I am spinning and I don't know what to do. So I do nothing. Like, and
Yeah.
maybe that's what my body needs and my brain needs, and that's fine. But even keeping track of some of those things to do in those different buckets, or I don't know, do people have different things and systems that they implement that are successful for them? I know
Yes,
everybody's different.
and um I mean, one thing with ADHD is we're consistently inconsistent. So often what we do is we have a system and it works for a while, and then we need a new system and that works for a
Yeah.
while. And having an acceptance of that, where you're just like, oh, new system time, as opposed to I've failed, this system doesn't work for me, nothing's gonna work for me. It's like, no, you just need novelty. That one has become stale. We need a new one now. That's fine. I know people who have planners that their planners are like 3-ring spirals, and each month is a completely different planner. So they
Ah,
have a new planner each month that keeps them going, right? Like we do need to like cater to our novelty. But another part of that is knowing, like, that, just recognizing, oh, there is just too much.
mm,
Like the expectations on myself is unrealistic, and I'm gonna
mhm.
let some shit go. Like, I'm gonna,
Yeah.
some things I'm just going to not do, and that'll be fine. Like, you know,
Mhm.
we will be fine. And taking some time to sit down and think about those things. Like for myself, some things that are really hard for me are emails and keeping my bedroom clean, because no
Uh-huh.
one else is in my bedroom. Why would I clean it? And so, except
Yep.
for the fact that I like a clean bedroom, but it's going to be the last on my priority list, right? And email. So
Sure.
those are two things I know takes a lot of spoons, takes a lot of mental and emotional energy for me.
Mhm.
And so one of the things I did with my email is, if you email me, you're going to get a response back that says, I'll get back to you in a week.
Mhm.
And that's it. So sorry, deal with it. If
I
you're
read that and I loved that.
and
I
like
saw that on
and
one of your emails. I was like, I love this.
yeah, which I got from my friend Angela Rockwell, who's a somatic practitioner. I was like, I am stealing that. And my clients have my phone number, so they can text me if they need to get to me. So I, you know, I if you're not my actual client at the moment, you can wait a week, deal, you know, sorry, deal with
Mm.
it or whatever,
Yeah.
you know. And that's just one of the ways that I take care of myself. And if I'm having what I like to call red light day, where like I'm, you know, red, green, yellow, and like the red light day is like my just like nope day, then I will not be cleaning my room today, and I will not be answering any emails. And that's just what's going to happen. And that might pile up over a few days. And then when I have a green light day, I can get to it and catch up, you know, and I can schedule a body double or whatever other strategies I need in order to make a plan to catch up. But I allow myself these periods of, because we're kind of sprinters. We're like all
Yes.
on or all off, and we just need those
Yes.
off days, and we need to be okay with it, and we need to
Yes.
just let ourselves and just trust that we're going to be able to catch up, and we don't need to stress about it, right? So like the other part of it is the emotional regulation. So when you're frozen, you're
Mhm.
in overwhelm. So
Yes.
in that moment, you need some self-care. And I think that what we tend to do when we need that self-care is run to a screen. I need to
Yes.
relax, I'm going to scroll on my phone. I need to relax, I'm going to go watch TV. And the problem with that is, because there's screens are great for, they're just stimulating. So
Mhm.
like recognizing the difference between fun time and relaxing time is really
Mm.
important. And that can be hard with ADHD, because with too much relaxation we can get understimulated, and then we
Mhm.
can actually get depressed. You know, boredom makes us
Yeah.
depressed, sort of. And so but screens are really stimulating. They're more stimulating than we think. We think we're relaxing, your body's sort of
Mhm.
resting, like you're not moving, but your nervous system's still activated. You're like going
Mhm.
on social media, you're just like, oh, a puppy, oh, a genocide. Like, you know, it's really wild, going up and down. Like, and so really put in those moments where you're frozen, learning how to check in with yourself, how to regulate and not go immediately to the screen, because that's not going to rejuvenate you. Finding something that's rejuvenating. From one of the things for me, I like to, I'll go do and sit down and do a Sudoku, and when I come back, I might have a clearer idea of like, okay, I guess I could start with doing this, you know,
Mm.
or I'll go play fetch with my dog for a few minutes. These things that are, it's not completely boring, but it's not something I'm going to get totally wrapped into. You know, I'm not like, I'm having the best time ever. Because if I'm having the best time ever, why would I go back to doing work? That's,
Right.
you know, so
Right.
having some kind of neutral activities can be really helpful. And then having some, you know, an understanding of how to just regulate in general, whether that be breathing techniques. movement is so underrated. And I think the
Mm.
problem is that we live in a society that really shames people into move so you can get skinny and be desirable. And you're like, no, how about move because it's good for your body and it's good for your brain. And it's actually one of the most researched, beneficial things for ADHD. But moving in, you don't need to go to the gym. Like you can just wiggle around or go swimming or dance in your kitchen or jump up and down or whatever, but that like movement can be really regulating. There's a lot of things that can be regulating to the nervous system. And so knowing those things, when you get into that stuck space, first regulating, maybe stepping aside to do one of those like more neutral, rejuvenating activities. And then when you come back, being able to self-coach and be like, okay, what are my talk to yourself in the way that you would talk to a child, talk to yourself in the way you wish your parents talked to you, okay, and I'll do this out loud, but you can do it in your head if you have an internal monologue. Like, some people don't, I don't know. And so like that, I'll be like, okay, these are the things I need to do. How much time do I have right now? You have about 30 minutes. Okay, so these things that take more than 30 minutes are off the table. Like, so these are the three things. Like, I can go do some gardening, I can clean the kitchen, or I can answer some emails. Okay, what's the weather outside? It's pretty hot. I don't think I'm going to do gardening. Okay, do we want to answer some emails or do we want to clean the kitchen? Do I feel like moving or do I feel like sitting? Okay, I think actually I think I need more movement right now. I'm going to go clean the kitchen. So being able to talk yourself through that. And then if you go, oh, I actually really don't want to clean the kitchen. Like, oh, why not? What's going on? Oh, it's sticky. I don't really sensorily. That's not what I want right now. Would gloves help? No, I just don't even want to be in there. Okay, let's do email then. Like the same way that you would talk to a kid and like coach them through stuff like that. You do that with yourself. So that's just like a little blurb of what a way that I would get through that.
Sheila, I have never heard this before. Like, thank you. That is so helpful for me because where I go is, well, what's wrong with you? Why don't you want to clean the kitchen? No, you know what I mean? That is still my go-to. That is my knee-jerk reaction. So I want you to know when you go to sleep tonight, I want you to know you have at least helped one person today, and that is me. So
Good.
I want to thank you because I feel like that is the permission and the reality check, really, that some of us need who have ADHD is because we can slip real quickly back into that, like, you're just lazy. In fact, I have said that I am lazy more times in the past year than I think I've ever. And it is horrible. I would never say that to one of my kids, one of my friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
And it is not good.
No, it's not good. I have a self-coaching class and my classes are all tiered pricing. So it's like a sliding scale. So, and there's always a few free tickets. I also have a self-coaching workbook on my website if you don't want to see people. That's $30. So you can teach yourself how to talk to yourself because I really feel like that's one of the three pillars of like shame reduction, which in turn helps executive functioning, I feel like, is trauma therapy, self-coaching, and understanding community. Having talking to other people that have a similar brain and similar experiences is so healing. And like those three things, I feel like that is like step one for like how we're going to get out of the shame spiral and into like, oh, I can solve this problem. I'm not a problem. I have problems and I'm going to solve them and it's okay.
I love that. I love that so much. And as we start wrapping up, I got something to share with you. And then I want to hear like all the things about like how people can find you and sign up and all that stuff to work with you. But when you were talking about, what do I feel like doing? Do I want to move? Do I need to rest? That internal kind of self-check-in. And okay, so about I don't know, 6 months ago or so. Now, bear in mind, my closet has been a disaster for as long as I can. I mean, I've been pregnant, all these times. Like, I got maternity clothes, I got my fat clothes, I got my skinny clothes, which I totally know I'm not supposed to use those labels, and they're not helpful. But I've got all these sizes, all these things, all these climates, all this stuff. My closet is like, it can't think in there, it can't breathe. And I just go about my daily business and kind of pretend it doesn't exist, right? And so about 6 months ago, I woke up and I was like, it changes today. It changes now. I don't know why I was motivated on that day. I have no idea. I don't know if I was struck by lightning in my sleep. Something happened and I did it all in one day. And my husband was like, What happened?" I'm like, "I don't know, but it's clean." And he's like, "No, no, no, I'm totally happy. Like, that's great. Good for you and all this." But it's just so funny is that, and I think I will like my first reaction will be like, "Yeah, I'm so weird." But you know what? How cool is that? That like, all right, when I get motivated to do something, boom, I get it done.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's it. That's the sprinters thing, like we have
yeah,
those green light days and we're just like, go. And you're like, oh, I just did 8 weeks of work in 1 hour. Like, I don't know how I just did that, but I did it. And some of, living with ADHD is, I know a lot of people, they'll be like, oh, I just wait for that magic. I just sit around and wait for the magic. But if you're sitting around and hating yourself in the meantime,
yeah,
you're going to be less likely to find the magic. And that's what I've found with myself is that the more work that I do to, regulate my nervous system, to feel good about myself, to feel okay about my ADHD, to just like live like a happy, like fulfilled life, I get the magic more often. I get the magic. I can't predict when I'm going to get it, but I can get, I'll get those sprints a lot more often versus when I was in my 20s and I didn't know what was going on and I had it's like anxiety, depression, and like all these things. It was just it would take forever. It would be weeks and weeks, like you said, until the magic would come, and then I would do the thing, or it would have to be like right at the deadline where I'm stressed out, and we can't live like that forever. Like that urgency won't work forever, like and so yeah, doing the work to just feel good about yourself and take care of yourself, it's going to just make it so that magic comes more often, and being okay with, oh, it's not coming today. Today is a rest day. Guess that's what's happening. Like, is okay.
uh, okay, Sheila, I have enjoyed this conversation so much. It has been absolute magic for me. And so I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on and tell us where we can find you, do we download that book for $30? Because I'm
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can. That's on my website. So website is SheilaHenson.com, SheilaHenson, like the Muppets. And it's on there. The website is it's in progress right now, so there might be some dead links. So I'm sorry if that's true. But on there's the store. In the store, you can find the workbook, and there's some more workbooks in the works. And then there are in my groups and classes, you can find live classes. They all come with the recordings. If you don't want to show up, you just want the recording, just sign up and you'll get the recording when it's done. I also have pre-recorded classes. There's a couple on there, and that's the title, pre-recorded classes. The groups are really fun because you get to hang out with other ADHDers. Like I said, I think that community aspect is really great. I have one for ADHD autistics and one for just ADHD. And those are super fun. I have classes that I teach with other people, including I have one with a somatic therapist, or two with different somatic therapists, of burnout recovery and emotional regulation. I have an ADHD body basics with my friend who's an ADHD autistic professional lifter and body coach.
Wow.
Really fascinating, fun stuff on there. And all my classes and groups are on a sliding scale. And if you need other pricing, or you're just like, hey, I'm in a hard place, I'll just let you in for free. Don't take advantage, please. Those who pay money are allowing access for people who need it, and I love that. It's amazing that the community allows me to run my business this way, just based on generosity, and I think that's beautiful. I also do couples coaching, family coaching, all of that. Just book a consultation if you'd like one-on-one family or couples, and we chat for 30 minutes for $30, and then come up with a plan for you. And if I'm not the right person for you, I'll recommend you to someone else. And I'm also on social media, on ADHD, on Instagram and TikTok, and I guess Facebook. I never go on there, as ADHD Coach Sheila. And I have a lot of my Instagram's a great resource for graphics and things like that having to do with ADHD. And my TikTok is where I kind of blab about all of the new research that I read or thoughts that I have. And so it's a lot more like ADHD than the more organized Instagram. Yeah.
That is all fantastic. Thank you so, so much. I cannot wait to continue to just hear about all this incredible stuff you're doing. I mean, we've been talking for all this time now. I never even asked you. I was like, oh, I want to talk about the mediation. So I'll just maybe have to have you back at some point too.
Sounds great.
I mean, you're amazing. You're a wealth of knowledge. And again, I want to just say thank you for doing this important work. This is huge. And so, all my love and gratitude to you. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was really fun. Hopefully we'll talk soon.
Sounds good.